reciprocity, and let's have cricket, commerce, culture, and so forth. So that's the second important reality which needs to be understood. The third important reality in today's world, and it has a geopolitical and geoeconomic context, is that in Pakistan today, putting precedence to economics over politics, Pakistan is emerging as a regional hub of connectivity, investment, and transit. And you can see the linkages which have been developing, whether it's the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor as part of the One Belt, One Road initiative given by the Chinese President Xi Jinping, because the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, and incidentally, I'm also chairman of the Parliamentary Committee on CPEC. That is the flagship and the pilot project of the One Belt, One Road, which links 65 countries of Asia, Africa, Middle East, and Europe. And recently, there was a big summit on that in Beijing as well. So, and then there's also TAPI, the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline. There's talk of the Iran-Pakistan pipeline, which used to be also with India. And there's also this connectivity through corridors, through ports, pipelines, economy, energies, roads, and railways. In fact, there's so much talk of pipelines that people say there'll be a Pipelinistan in the region, linking together Central Asian republics, South Asia, and this region. So this is the context which defines the role of the Pakistani media. And in this context, I'd like to give you an illustration from history of an example where a major media initiative was taken, in which I was one of the major components in 1984, when I was editor of an independent left-of-center daily newspaper called The Muslim. We organized the first ever Pakistan-India track tour in Islamabad in May 1984, whether it's Mr. Prem Bhatia, Khushwant Singh Saab, Kuldeep Nair Saab, Bhavani Sen Gupta Saab, Pran Chopra Saab, all the top leading lights, and including some retired generals, other people from different parties. BJP wasn't around then, but at least the Congress party was there and others were there. And so they took part in that. So we organized that, and the Muslim newspaper was the first newspaper in Pakistan which invited Indian journalists to write regular op-ed columns in the Pakistani press. And I was the first Pakistani journalist who had a regular syndicated column in the Indian press. Hindustan Times, Times of India, and Mr. M.J. Akbar's newspaper, The Telegraph then, from Calcutta. So that kind of media interaction we had initiated, we were ahead of the times. And we had conferences. I remember in 1983, we had the conference on the non-aligned media hosted by Mrs. Gandhi, where I went also, and I was elected as vice chairman of the conference, NAMedia, with Nikhil Chakravarti Saab, who was the head of that newspaper, the weekly, and there were Girilal Jain and others, and Mrs. Gandhi made a big speech with Shada Prashad. So those were the difficult times, and then we also had this anniversary of the Times of India 150th anniversary, which was hosted by Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, and again, I was one of the keynote speakers. So this media interaction at the level of the journalists is something which has been happening there in the past. Now, when we talk of in today's world, I think a couple of aspects which he mentioned, Mr. Manish Tiwari, in his op-ed were very relevant. One, that for the future, when we talk of media relationships, I think it has to be a pan-media institutional initiative, not limited to one or two corporate houses of either India and Pakistan, unlike the Aman Ki Asha, which was just, Assalamu alaikum ji. Aap udhar aa jaye. Begum Arifa is also a member of parliament from Pakistan. And she's welcome. She can sit there. So a pan-media institutional initiative which includes journalists and journalist bodies, including the print, social media, electronic media. Then you also mentioned the co-production of content. I think that is also extremely relevant for the future. But the most important thing would have to be a political will, political support. and with a very strong economic content. Unless the two countries, because the state defines the narratives of the media in both India and Pakistan, and about each other. And I think despite the privately owned media, we can see the narrative still being what I call the officially certified truth in more cases than not. And I think we have to learn from the example of whether it was Nixon in China or de Gaulle in the case of Algeria, that initiatives have to be taken. For example, on the issue of Kashmir, we always see that even in the vibrant Indian media, there is hardly any investigative journalism on that, because the official narrative is defined, and that has taken forward. So I think that unless the two countries develop a strategic stake in each other's economy, in each other's development, the narratives will continue to be distorted. And I feel, for example, the Iran-Pakistan pipeline used to be Iran-Pakistan-India pipeline. And it can still be a factor that if India comes back, or even if it's the issue of the China-Pakistan economic corridor or the One Belt, One Road, I think if India comes into that, that will also provide for connectivity, because all other countries of South Asia, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's Nepal, whether it's Sri Lanka, whether it's Bangladesh, whether it's Myanmar, they've already joined in, apart from the Central Asian republics. So that will add a strategic stake. There are, finally, I would say, two challenges which are very important when we talk of media narratives. One is regional and one is India specific. I think I was reading today the speech of President Pranab Mukherjee, who has left office today, I believe. And he said that any discourse must be divorced from violence, verbal or physical. And I think that is a cause of concern. And I was just also reading the latest issue of The Economist. And The Economist has mentioned a cover story of India and Pakistan 70 years after. And that there is a letter by retired IAS officers of the Indian Administrative Service, where they have mentioned that, quote unquote, authoritarianism in India is leading to stifling the freedom of debate, discussion and dissent, which is a cause of concern. And in today's Hindustan Times, I was reading that one of the organizations which is linked with the Indian RSS and led by Mr. R.N. Batra has asked for a revision of curricula in the textbooks, where they say certain things have to be eliminated, including references to India's Muslim past, Mughal past. And this is in today's Hindustan Times, by the way. They've asked the National Council of Educational Research and Training of India, NCERT, that this needs to be a certain revision. And they've even asked for the ban of couplets of Mirza Ghalib and even the poetry of part of Rabindranath Tagore also. So I think that this kind of an ideological approach within Indian state, and which has ramifications for Indian foreign policy, because sometimes we see this also linked with Indian foreign policy vis-a-vis Pakistan, has a certain strong implications for the media narrative, and which I think is counterproductive to a harmonious coexistence. And the second aspect, which I think is also another challenge, apart from this challenge I point out, is the regional context. Is we are seeing a review of US policy towards South Asia, I believe now. It's not just Afghanistan. We are looking forward to this review, because in the past, under President Barack Hussein Obama, there was absence of clarity in the US policy, and it seemed to be that the whole area had been either outsourced or ignored, and it was allowed to dither and just move without any direction. It was almost a rudderless policy, I think, especially after the death of Mr. Holbrooke. So we hope that if there is going to be a review of US policy on South Asia, that has to include components which pertain to South Asia as a whole, looking at comprehensive security for South Asia, where each of the key players, including Pakistan, including India, including China, including Afghanistan, their interests would be fully preserved and protected, and there's some clarity in approach. Because otherwise then the media narrative would also be determined by the fact that the 16-year-old longest war in American history, Afghanistan, then there will be a blame game and a looking for scapegoats, which is of course again counterproductive, and that will lead to a yawning chasm between the ground realities of South Asia and the perceptions outside South Asia, especially in Washington, D.C. But I'm grateful to Mr. Bharat Gopalaswamy for taking this initiative. I think it's a positive initiative, probably the first of its kind where you've had interlocutors from India and Pakistan from the same field and who are have been journalists also, but also government ministers in the past, to talk about these issues and seek a common ground to build a better tomorrow for the 1/5 of humanity that resides in South Asia. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. And this, you know, our president and CEO is a former Wall Street journalist.
I see.
So he was the chief London correspondent in his days.
That's very good.
And that's why this subject is special to us, and it's appreciated at the leadership levels. And this is the debate, the civil debate is also very much consistent with our values.
Oh,
so
great.
there is no wonder that, you know, we want to take a
Excellent.
key start in this initiative. There are a few more guests who have joined us, and I'm happy to also report that this event is being live streamed right now in India. And some of the guests who could not be accommodated here are in the subsequent room with the live stream video. So I apologize that we did not have more seats, but I'm also happy that they could join in a virtual world still being real. That's the beauty of technology and the media today. And with that, Manish.
Bharat, thank you very much for hosting us and for hosting this discussion. Senator Mushaid Hussain, ladies and gentlemen, this event is taking place at a point in time when the relationship between the two countries is not really over the moon, to put it metaphorically. And so therefore, perhaps it's a good time to possibly reflect as to how a change in narrative could really be possible. I think it will be appropriate to possibly say that the media is not responsible for the state of the relationship. If at all there is something responsible for the state of the relationship, it is the 70-year-old past that we have, beginning with the partition of India and Pakistan, the 4 wars that we fought after that, and the passed on memories from generation to generation, which have perpetuated bitterness rather than trying to emphasize to some extent this syncretic togetherness which both peoples at a people's level share. In such a situation, can the media really play a role in trying to inject an element of positivity in the relationship, trying to build a counter narrative, especially when there seems to be a reluctance or a recalcitrance for reasons which I would not elaborate at any length, states not wanting to go down that particular route. And I would outline 2 scenarios out here. There is a scenario where states want to engage with each other, and the media ends up playing the role of a spoiler. There is a jingoistic narrative, a hyper-nationalistic narrative, which is then unleashed in both the countries, and which becomes an impediment to possibly a more constructive engagement. And then there is a situation whereby if both the countries do not really want to engage with each other, the media actually becomes a force multiplier in exacerbating the tensions which already exist. Now, we've seen these 2 paradigms play themselves out repeatedly in the India-Pakistan context over the past 3 decades. The question is that, or the conundrum is that, can we break out of the zero-sum game and actually come to a modus vivendi whereby the media can play a more positive role in trying to create the atmospherics which can really bring about a better engagement. You see, in the context of our relationship, Donald Rumsfeld is not the most favorite person to quote, but as he said that there are the known knowns and there are the known unknowns and there are these unknown unknowns, and each of them has been documented in the India-Pakistan context on the 23rd of September 1998 in the joint statement, which actually outlined the issues on which a composite dialogue has to take place. So you've got terror, you've got Kashmir, you've got Siachen, you've got Tulbul Barrage, you've got Sir Creek, and etc., etc. So therefore, all those contentious issues between us are extremely well catalogued, and they have been debated to death over all these years. But the fact is that there is another reality which has not been catalogued, and that's the one which I referred to earlier. That is the syncretic togetherness, that is the feeling of warmth and reciprocity which people of both the countries actually get when they visit each other. And there is a certain shared commonality, there is a certain shared heritage or a certain shared past which we, even if we want to ignore and deny, does not go away. So therefore, there is a platform to build upon. And there cannot be a more opportune moment than today, primarily because, as Senator Mushaid Hussain was pointing out, that the private media markets in both the countries are extremely evolved and developed. You know, to give you a snapshot of what the Indian media market looks like, you have 110,000 odd print media publications. You have 891 television channels. 391 of them are news and entertainment channels. You have 200 FM radio stations, 200 community radio stations. You have 183 million people who have access to cable and satellite television. And you have 1.19 billion mobile phones, 465 million people on the internet, and a growing population of people who are becoming smartphone users. And coupled with that, you also have a strange irony that in both the countries, you have the public broadcaster. And whether it is PTV in Pakistan and its attendant paraphernalia, or you have Prasar Bharati in India, which has Doordarshan and All India Radio. And the irony which I was pointing to is that if you look at the content of the state broadcasters, and which comes to the point of the state really actually driving the media discourse in the context of India and Pakistan, you find that the most dovish on the relationship between the two countries are actually the public broadcasters. So therefore, there is this great dilemma, or this great irony, that if the states are actually so hawkish, and if everything is scripted, then why is it that the script does not unfold or does not really play itself out on the public broadcasters in both the countries? And that is, I think, an element of hope which we possibly can build on. And as on the Pakistani side, Senator Mushaid Hussain was pointing out, 105 television channels, 75 private FM radio stations, 105 million people who have access to cable and satellite television, a huge young population which is connected to the internet and growing on a daily basis. So therefore, there is a situation whereby these convergences or the march of technology can be leveraged. And we have a template in the past. And the template, for all its flaws, was Aman Ki Asha. The fact is that between 2010 and 2013, Aman Ki Asha caught the imagination of people on both sides of the border. Unfortunately, it ended up falling victim to intermedia corporate rivalry, which actually scuttled a good initiative. But at the end of the day, till that point in time that it played itself out, the Aman Ki Asha paradigm did generate a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of goodwill on both sides of the border. So, while there will always be a political context, there will always be a geopolitical context to the relationship between these two countries. And I think the relationship between any two countries, bilaterally or even multilaterally, does have these contexts. But the important thing is that if you narrow it down to what is there between both India and Pakistan, you see an enormous amount of demand on both sides for content which is generated by the other side. You know, for example, the ZTV network started a channel called Zindagi, and Zindagi would only show Pakistani plays, and Zindagi was extremely popular in India. Similarly, if you look at the Pakistani television broadcasting platforms, AR Buy or Geo News, they buy about $5 million US dollars of Indian content, you know, on an annual basis, despite the fact that PEMRA has capped Indian content as at not more than 6% of the total content which plays out in a 24-hour cycle. Similarly, the demand for illegal DTH, Indian DTH in Pakistan is a $150 million industry. So, therefore, you have both convergences on infrastructure as well as convergences on content. Now, the only question is that, notwithstanding the political will, which is like a weather vane, you know, which varies depending upon what the proclivities or what the situation is at a particular point in time, you can actually have co-production of content beginning in the digital space, a kind of an India-Pakistan Netflix, which can emphasize on the commonalities. You can have co-produced, co-anchored programs on news and entertainment shows, which actually give a perspective from both sides and actually have the impact of de-demonizing the other. Then another thing which is extremely germane is that we have an agreement between India and Pakistan that both countries will have correspondence in each other's territory. Unfortunately, that agreement is implemented more in the breach rather than in the rule. And when we actually put this to some media owners on both sides at a recent track too, both of them said that if we have our people on the ground in India and we have our people on the ground in Pakistan and they report on the developments, it actually creates a much better atmospheric, because you are hearing from your own man on the ground. So I think it is extremely important that this particular arrangement, which has already been in place and which unfortunately has withered away over a period of time, needs to be re-energized, and we need to have people on both sides. And finally, there is a strong case. You know, the internet was the most audacious experiment in anarchy, and it has succeeded. Today, you have more content which is produced every day than from the beginning of civilization till the end of the 20th millennium. So in such a dynamic media environment, for India and Pakistan not to have a free flow of books, of publications, of electronic media, of newspapers, which are in any case available on the internet, you know, is something which, for the lack of a better word, is completely and absolutely obtuse. So I think there is a need to try and build on these commonalities, for the simple reason, as you were correctly pointing out, that South Asia is home to 1/5 of humanity. 2 billion people. And unfortunately, it is the India-Pakistan paradigm, whether we like it or not, which to some extent holds the future of South Asia as a hostage. So I think it's incumbent upon everybody, people on both sides who are concerned about the relationship, the media owners on both sides who possibly feel that there is a certain amount of both commercial imperatives as well as larger, broader philosophical imperatives which would be served by trying to normalize the narrative. And the one thing that we must keep in mind is that if this effort has to succeed, this effort has to be continuous, and it cannot, and I underscore that, be a state patronized effort, because relationships between states will keep on changing as the context changes, and I think I will stop at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Manish.
Thank you, Bharat.
Thank you.
It appears you both are largely congruous in agreeing. That makes for a boring debate, but let me see if me or the audience can trigger a few. I think I'll start with both of you, and I'll start with the point that you finished on, which is the larger question of building the political will and the political support with a strong economic driver. And with the current state of relations, if both of you were information minister, if you were a sitting information minister, or I wouldn't frame it that way. Let's just say, how would you pursue these initiatives today? And I'll start with you there.
Thank you. I'll just give you a very interesting example last week in Pakistan. On 18th of July, the Lahore High Court heard a petition. And because the Pakistan Electronic Media Regulatory Authority, which is called PEMRA, had banned Indian teleplays on Pakistan television. The case came before the Lahore High Court, and the Chief Justice of the Lahore High Court, Mr. Justice Mansoor Ali Shah, decided on 18th of July. He said that the world today is a global village. It is unreasonable to impose restrictions on such plays, and they should be opened up. And I think that's a very good sign. I'll give you another example. Kargil conflict. Because the instinct of governments is to, this question of banning. And we're talking of a borderless world before that even. The Indian government banned Pakistan television in 1999. It was Pramod Mahajan then, the information minister. And so there was a lot of pressure. I was information minister from Pakistan, that please ban Zee TV and Doordarshan. I refused to do so. I said the people of Pakistan, the viewers, are smart enough, and in fact they're smarter than the rulers, smart enough to decipher fact from fiction. Let them decide. Let's not insult their intelligence. And I didn't ban that. And that opened up the thing that at least, and soon after that, the Indian ban was also lifted. So I feel that the political will is important because, after all, when we talk of leadership, although I agree that it should be a media-focused thing, but media in both countries often corporate interests, then what is this, TRPs, the ratings aspects. But unless it's a collective effort with vision and will to push it forward, I think the political leadership can play a very pivotal role in taking it forward. Because otherwise, I remember when I was a student in America, those days, the greatest athlete of the 20th century, Muhammad Ali, the world heavyweight boxing champion, he was demonized. He was called a traitor. And the whole media went along with it because of his political views when he opposed the Vietnam War, until and unless the Supreme Court of the United States lifted the ban. So sometimes I think the initiatives have to be coming from quarters other than the media, because then media, if it becomes part of that propaganda machine, it becomes part of that problem. And we have seen it, Manish Tawari Saab, recently the Iraq war, which was based on a lie, weapons of mass destruction. Even the Vietnam War, the Tonkin Gulf resolution, or the domino theory. So I think that in the case of India and Pakistan, we have some of the best and the brightest brains in the third world, both in the media and even in the field of politics and legal fraternity, and some initiative of that kind needs to be taken, which is irrespective of the ground realities. And I agree with Mr. Manish Tiwari that that initiative, irrespective of governmental attitudes, needs to be taken forward by sane people who have a long-term vision for South Asia.
Bharat, I think we need to do two or three things should be done, irrespective of whatever the context may be. Number one, the downlinking of public broadcasters in both the countries. That should be not only permitted, but that should be encouraged, whereby at least those people who may be interested in getting an Indian view of things, or those who may be interested in getting a Pakistani view of things, would have access to each other's public broadcasters, which I think possibly can be a good starting point. Number two, what I was mentioning earlier, the agreement which we have with regard to correspondence in both the countries. That's something which needs to be again invigorated, and we should allow, rather than actively discourage what's been happening, correspondence from both wire agencies, even broadcasting platforms and print platforms, to be based in each other's countries. I think that would help to a very great extent. And the third thing is that the digital space really needs to be leveraged, because the digital space is a platform agnostic, and number two, it has the ability to be able to carry curated content which can be subscribed, and so therefore there is a veritable revenue model which is available. So co-produced content in the digital space, which actually tries to, I will not say give a counter view, but tries to put a more humanizing narrative to what we have currently, could be three initiatives which are doable and which need to be taken forward.
I'll follow up with you on if I recall correctly, you said the media is not responsible for the current state of not the current state, for generally geopolitical relations. Media cannot be held solely responsible.
Senator Mushahid Hussain brought up the point of TRPs.
Right.
Right? Now, the fact is that when you indulge in jingoism, where you indulge in hypernationalism, why does it get resonance in terms of TRPs? And the reason is because we've created a fertile field of hatred, of odium, of passed on institutional atrocities from one generation to another. So therefore there is a very fertile field of bitterness to tap into, because if that field would not have been there, and possibly you would have had a more conducive kind of an environment, that resonance in terms of eyeballs wouldn't have come. So that's why I'm saying that to say that the corrosive media discourse is responsible for the state of play between India and Pakistan is absolutely and completely erroneous. It is it's the trajectory of our relationship and the manner which it has evolved over the last 70 years.
Then how do you hold some of these people who promote this kind of narrative within the media space? Where is the accountability mechanism?
Well, you should not. According to me, a free media is a free media. And so therefore, if you believe in the freedom of speech and expression, then you obviously have to accept their freedom of speech and expression. What you really need to do is to match a narrative which may be corrosive or which is corrosive with a counter narrative. And more importantly, try and see as to how the counter narrative can have a more humanizing influence especially on the younger generations, which do not carry that baggage personally, but unfortunately the passed on baggage of institutional memory is actually much, much more vicious.
Yeah, that is what I was coming with, was how do you balance the freedom of speech and expression vis-a-vis holding somebody accountable for something like this. And do you have something to add? Or
I think that it's difficult to have that. For example, in the current context, there are challenges faced by certain countries, especially on the social media, where there's often a proliferation of hate speech. And there are efforts, because then that vitiates tensions. If you remember in the Rwanda killings and the massacres in 1994, when 1 million people were brutally massacred, the radio stations played a key role in the fight between the Hutus and the Tutsis, because they were inciting them to violence. And as he said, that of course there certain basis was there, and then that hatred, the bigotry, the jingoism, and it became almost into a racist massacre. So, and today we are seeing also in certain parts the social media, some aspects where a very vicious hate campaigns based on ethnicity, often Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, attacking people's nationality or ethnicity and linking it with terrorism or extremism. So I think that is a certain challenge, and maybe there can be some legal remedies to that. But on the whole, I would say that I would agree with Mr. Manish Tiwari that there are self-correcting mechanisms in these countries. They have the press council, they have other areas which have legal and other punitive measures, but they are done by the organizations themselves.
I want to jump.
Bharat, I'll just add something to that. You see, the social media challenge is actually a very critical challenge. And if agreed rules of engagement in the virtual civilization do not emerge, and we have the multi-stakeholder consultations going on currently, I'm afraid that like we saw the rise of the internet during our lifetime, you actually might see the demise of the internet. You will see the balkanization of the internet in terms of cultural value systems, in terms of hegemonistic influences. You have already a situation whereby certain countries have firewalled the internet and have converted it into a huge intranet. So therefore, for all those people who believe that the internet is the best thing which could have possibly happened to this world, it has made the discourse horizontal from being vertical. There is a need for those people to step up and create a campaign to ensure that these aspects of the social media, where everybody is a broadcaster without any restraint or responsibility and can say anything that he wants, which can have very, very severe implications. We saw it in 2013 in Bangalore, when because of a campaign on social media, you had people from the Northeast having to leave and go back because there were some miscreants who had created a situation which was far from healthy. So I'm not an advocate of policing the internet. I think that's a bad idea. But definitely there is a strong case for agreed rules of engagement which ostracize this kind of behavior from the social media space to actually come and hold the field.
Thank you. I have.
Hello, Jay Kansar from the Hindu American Foundation. My question is for Senator Hussain. The issue of blasphemy laws tends to whip up a lot of sentiment in Pakistan, and oftentimes those who are accused of blasphemy become targeted through social media campaigns or even WhatsApp, which is a very popular application. And those who wish to speak out against blasphemy laws are oftentimes persecuted themselves, including Governor Tasir of Punjab. How can the media in Pakistan play a role to correct this, as you have mentioned before?
Yes, I agree with you. That's a serious issue, because there's often these laws are misused, and also there's a lynch mob mentality even on the social media when incidents take place, and often these things take place on the basis of falsehood, and that falsehood is perpetuated, and there's a proliferation of that, and it has regrettable consequences, and these are cases which took place not just in Pakistan but also in India, when there were false allegations of people eating beef, and they were just the mobs lynched them. So I think that the most important thing is legal remedies for that those who are caught, then they are punished according to the law, which happened in the case of Governor Tasir. His killer was hanged by the court. So I think that is for starters, and otherwise also there has to be a broader social responsibility of the political leadership or the general leadership, that they do not create an environment where such hate or such kind of jingoism or such kind of bigotry is allowed to flourish. And I think that is a responsibility both of the state as well as of society.
I have the gentleman there, then I'll come to this side.
I'm Piyush Zubair with the Voice of America, and my question is from Mr. Mushahid Hussain. Last year when you were in DC, and we remember you talked about that Kashmir will keep on burning until we resolve. The Kabul will keep on burning unless the Kashmir issue is resolved. It was reported widely by the Indian media. So can you elaborate, and the media reported it as like a threat unless there is, so can you elaborate on that, and what do you think the current strategy being drafted by the new administration here, will it include Kashmir too?
First of all, Piyush Zubair Sahab, what has been attributed to me by the Indian media is not correct. We didn't start the burning of Kabul. It started in 1979 after the Soviet invasion and occupation. And now after 9/11, there's a situation there. Already almost 48% of Afghanistan has ungoverned spaces. So it's not that what I had said, that when we look at the regional situation, security should be seen in a comprehensive context, and security cannot be compartmentalized. I think that what I said in October now seems to be having, under the new administration of President Donald Trump, some resonance when they talk of not an Afghan strategy or an AFPAC strategy, they talk of a regional strategy. Because the region is such, there are inextricable linkages between what is happening in the major capitals of South Asia. And that is why we in Pakistan, China, the United States, Afghanistan had the quadrilateral process. And if you have something happening in Kashmir, you have things happening in Kabul, you have a role of India. So those are all linkages, and I feel that security, you cannot say that if this area, you can douse one fire while fan the flames elsewhere, which is what is happening. And I think that my perspective, in my view, seems to be gaining ground when Rex Tillerson announces that there will be now a review based on a regional strategy, and I hope that regional strategy is there, because the biggest sufferers of the situation are especially the people of Afghanistan and the people of Pakistan. We have been in the eye of the storm since 1979. Pakistan has hosted the largest refugee population for the longest period in the modern post-World War II period. 3.5 million Afghan refugees, and we still host that. And there's a harmonious relationship by and large there, without any UNHCR support. And we have also been fighting since 9/11 the longest inland war against terrorism. So we would like that some clarity should emerge. And as you know, that was the administration of Mr. Obama, and I criticized that in Washington, and I criticized that when I went to the White House also. And I said Mr. Obama has no regional strategy, and the whole situation has been allowed to just wither on the vine, as they say, and dither, and it's a rudderless policy. So we are looking for answers from Washington that at least some clarity in terms of policy will emerge based on consultation with the principal stakeholders in the region, and which will also be equitable, which will not be tactical, and which will be loyal to the objective of promoting and preserving peace, security, and stability in the region where Pakistan is located, where Afghanistan is located, where Iran is located, where India is located, because this region has suffered enough. And this is the longest war in American history, 16 years already, and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. So let's see what emanates from that. We are expecting a delegation from the United States of America in the first week of August in Pakistan from the State Department and the US National Security Council, and we'll see what emerges from that. So we are watching and waiting.
So I'll take you and then I'll come to you this side.
Thank you so much. So this is Jahazaib Ali from ARY News TV, Pakistan. I'm the Washington correspondent. So in the last 20 and 30 years in your political career, you served the military government in Pakistan. You also served the political governments in Pakistan too. So which one of them is the wanted good relation with the India? Because you are in the politics for the last many years. So with military governments or the political government?
I think on the issue of, I didn't serve any military government, by the way. No, I was not. I was Minister for Information under Mr. Nawaz Sharif. But I did not. One thing I would like to say that all governments in Pakistan, military or civilian, they have been very keen for a close relationship, a normal relationship with India. And I think it's a myth to say that certain kinds of government want good relations, civilian governments want good relations, while military governments want bad relationship. That is not true. Some of the leading agreements signed in the past have been by military governments. Some have been by civilian governments. Simla was signed by Mr. Bhutto. Lahore Declaration by Mr. Nawaz Sharif. And Benazir Bhutto Sahaba came close to signing the Siachen Agreement. They had agreed with Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, but then the Indian military scuttled that. And the military regimes, you have had the Indus Waters Treaty with Ayub Khan. You had with General Zia this agreement on non-attack of nuclear installations in 1985. And under Musharraf, you had this ceasefire of 2003. So the state of Pakistan is very keen that relations with India be normalized. But the normalization, of course, also means resolution of outstanding disputes like Kashmir. And of course, as they say, you cannot have Hamlet without the Prince of Denmark. So we didn't start the uprising in Kashmir, which is a popular, spontaneous, widespread and indigenous uprising. Burhan Muzaffar Wani was not a Pakistani, he was a Kashmiri. So we feel that whether it's Palestine, whether it's Kashmir, the issues, until they are resolved, there cannot be any lasting peace, security and stability in either Middle East or in South Asia.
The gentleman here.
I'm Ahmad Khan and I am the president of American Friends of Balochistan. I would like to ask Senator Hussain, when will the Punjabi military and civilian leaders develop a sense of mine and thine, a sense of right and wrong? You guys come and hang a Sindhi politician Bhutto. You guys assassinate Nawab Bukti. You guys go, just 2 days ago we were talking about social media. Your Chief Minister of Punjab talks about genocide in Palestine. Your Defense Minister talks about genocide in Kashmir, while your helicopter gunships were firing on civilians in Dera Bukti. You guys abducted 250 Bukti tribesmen, including 100 women from Dera Bukti. You guys are doing unconscionable acts of state terror on the people of Balochistan. And you talk about Kashmir and you talk about Palestine. You don't have any shame, sir.
Oh.
The Chief Minister of Balochistan is Nawab Sanaullah Zeri, who is a Balochi. The governor of Balochistan is Muhammad Khan Achakzai, who is from Balochistan. Balochistan has a legally elected government. And I think that if there are lies peddled by planted people, I think those lies should be exposed. Let's talk of facts, not propaganda.
My name is my name is Lakhu Lohana, and I'm General Secretary of World Sindhi Congress. Unfortunately, the experience of Sindhi nation for last 70 years, that the views in the media are completely anti and of Sindhi people. The Sindhi people's movement for their civil, democratic, and political rights has been demonized, and that was the reason that GM said, the father of Sindhi nationalism, he remained a traitor, and he remained in 38 years of his Pakistan, 30 years in jail, and he always remained traitor. And likewise, Nawab Khair Bakhsh Mari, Bacha Khan, and even currently, there is a large movement is going on, and last 3 months alone, more than 50 Sindhi political activists have been abducted in the agency, and the so-called national media has never reported a single case. The Sindh that produces 70% of wealth of Pakistan, 75% of people, they live below poverty line, 70% suffer from malnutrition, 6.2 million children under the age of 10 that are out of education. Your Supreme Court's verdict is that 80% of people in Sindh, they do not, the water that is not suitable for even animal consumption, the hepatitis B and C strains are 29%. And this all is completely missing. And you are talking about CPEC. The Sindhi people, the Baloch people, they believe that this is designed to further colonize Sindh and Balochistan. You have never taken into consideration and into account and into the consent of Sindhi people and Baloch people. So do you think that this media, this approach should change? And because this is not going to work. If there is no social justice and if not recognition of these national rights, there will be no peace in Pakistan.
The people of Pakistan elected Mr. Asif Ali Zardari Sindhi as President of Pakistan. The government of Sindh is run by an elected government of the Pakistan People's Party for the last 30 years. And I think when you talk of people, let's not use the name, use the name of people. The biggest beneficiary of CPEC is right now Sindh province, which has 11 projects of CPEC.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have to.
So I think people are entitled to their opinions, but people are not entitled to falsifying facts.
I'm sorry, this is not falsifying. Asif and all these, even during the British time, these people who were Indians, and they were hating them. So it doesn't matter, anybody can be your agent, and he's not a sin.
The people have elected them.
You manipulate all these things. We know that, and you know that.
My name is Satish Gupta. I represent National Council of ACIN-Indian Association. My question is to Senator Saab. We have been relying on the United Nations resolution of 1948, and on both sides of the aisle, India and Pakistan, most of the population do not know what that resolution is. Time and again, anybody says we need a plebiscite without knowing the implication and how that has to be implemented. Don't you think media has a choice to inform public at large what the plebiscite and what the resolution is?
I think 100,000 people who have been martyred in Indian occupied Kashmir know what the UN resolution is and what is the word of Azadi.
1.2 billion and 200 million in your country. They should be informed what the resolution is.
Everybody knows.
No, they don't know.
Okay.
And the people are already resisting repression with their blood, sweat and tears.
If they know all those people will not say we need a plebiscite. What are the implications of plebiscite? They don't know how it can be implemented.
The United Nations resolutions are relevant. The rule of law is supreme.
Never renewed. Everything has a 3 years validation. All papers and documents in the life has a 3-year validation. Unless it is validated, I don't think it is a valid.
Please reread the UN resolutions. The facts are very clear.
Every document has a time of limitation.
Thank you. So I saw a couple of hands. The gentleman there.
Yeah, this is something actually that can be redressed if you guys want. This is about Pakistani and Indian correspondents based here in Washington. And every time we try to attend a news briefing or press conference by Pakistani or Indian leaders, we are hounded out. I mean, disgracefully. It happened to me 3-4 times. I was then working for an American news agency. They sent an invitation to the newsroom asking them to send a correspondent. They sent me. This was a press conference by Mr. Vajpayee, and I was stopped saying, I said, but look, this is your invitation. They said, yes, but you are still a Pakistani. And it happens every time somebody comes. So can we do something about that?
Want to go?
Well, the fact is that if it has happened, it is unfortunate. And I think there is a certain modus vivendi which needs to be found on both sides. After all, if you are holding a press conference, essentially you are talking to the people, and the press is the medium to talk to the people. So therefore, irrespective of whosoever the person is, whatever his credentials or bona fides, or for that matter, even inclination is, I think there is a case for treating people in a certain human manner and giving them access. Because in any case, by not allowing somebody into a room, it does not mean that you will be able to prevent him from seeing the live streaming of that event, and you will be able to prevent him from reporting. So I think these are things which are completely passé in today's day and age, and we need to really have the maturity to get over that.
It's not like preventing them. When I introduced myself as I work for Dawn, and your foreign minister once said in New York, yes, I know we respect Dawn and we respect your policies, but since you are a Pakistani, we cannot let you attend.
The next.
You have a question? Go ahead.
My name is Sundar Zara. I am a freelance journalist and a student. My question is regarding CPEC, and I want to ask it from Mr. Manish Tiwari, that the CPEC and One Belt One Road, it's a very progressive project, and no one can deny it. Pakistan and China both have invited all the regions, and most of the countries, I mean all of them actually, are interested in it and they are supporting it. But we see a reaction on Indian media, a very negative reaction on Indian media. The mainstream media, I'm not talking about just the social media, because social media cannot be pinpointed on one person or one organization. So do you think this is a conscious media war from Indian side? And is it like a public reaction? Is it a government propaganda? Or what do you have to say about that?
Look, we have a national position insofar as the One Belt, One Road is concerned. And the national position has two very distinct components. The first component is that we are not in any manner opposed to the larger conception of Asian connectivity. So therefore, if there is a project or if there is an initiative which envisages a larger Asian connectivity, we do not have a difficulty with it. We only have a difficulty with that part of the China-Pakistan economic corridor which passes through what we consider is territory illegally occupied by Pakistan. So therefore, that component of the China-Pakistan economic corridor is something that we have reservations about. And those reservations have been conveyed upfront to the Chinese. They have been articulated at various other fora, and that's a uniform national position which we have, irrespective of political color and political shade. And if the Indian media actually articulates a consensus position, well, then they are articulating a consensus position. Well, it is, as I said, it is a national position, and a national position has been taken by all political parties, irrespective of their shade, color, or their disposition.
The gentleman there.
Hi, my name is Khalid Hashmani. I'm a local Pakistani American origin, of Pakistani origin. I'm really impressed with today's program and thankful to Atlantic Council for organizing such an informative session. I'm thankful to both presenters for keeping cool, answering questions very nicely, and really giving a ray of hope that there are people in both countries whose goal is to bring people together rather than having to fight with each other. However, I have started watching Pakistani media for last 1 year on my tablet, and I noticed that there have been some very encouraging happenings. For example, Pakistani moderators will invite journalists from India and comment of mutual interest. What I've also observed in this small period of 1.5 years, that any small deviation or incident of hyper-nationalistic nature, like a flare-up in Pakistan or Balochistan or some Indian Asian card, sometimes would totally change the atmosphere. Same people who were so hard proponent of this unified approach of bringing the people of two countries together will be saying things which will be so unreasonable, insulting, abusing other side. What can you two recommend to make sure that it will discourage such a progress, continuous progress, being affected by these temporary flare-ups? Thank you.
Look, these episodical flare-ups will keep on happening, because depending upon how the contours of the relationship keep changing, you will have a situation whereby you will have people who yesterday were talking very rationally, tomorrow being at each other's throats. This is unfortunately the nature of the beast, and this is the nature of the medium on the reality that we live in. However, what is important, and that's why I stress that you cannot have this as an episodical engagement. You need to construct a counter-narrative. A counter-narrative which recognizes that we have differences. We have, if Pakistan has a problem with regard to India's approach to Kashmir, we have a problem with regard to the terror which is exported from Pakistan and which has been exported over the last 30 years, and so on and so forth, and we do not want to turn it polemical. But if you leave those contentious issues which have bedeviled the relationship for 70 years aside, there is a certain commonality, there is a certain convergence which can be emphasized, and that's the narrative which has to be built on a consistent basis by people on both sides who are realists, who recognize that at some point in time these disputes will need to be resolved, but also are cognizant of the fact that till the time that you do not have a narrative which actually humanizes the other, you will not be able to have a resolution of these disputes also.
I think the most important thing is twofold. One is that, again, whether it's the media leadership or the political leadership, they have to show that kind of vision and statesmanship and go against the tide, as it were. For 22 years, the People's Republic of China was demonized in the United States of America. Red China, Communist China, and so forth. And it required a statesman of the level of Richard Nixon to have that outreach. In South Africa, it was F.W. de Klerk who reached out and said he realized that unless you release Mandela and unless you have black majority rule, you'll have a bloodbath. These are ground realities determining this situation. So whether leadership is one aspect, the second is that recognition of ground realities. You can't wish the problem away. Now if somebody says that, for example, the problem of Kashmir is something that does not exist, or it's a creation of Pakistan or something like that, then what is happening on the ground in which there is a genuine, popular, indigenous, widespread, spontaneous resistance to repression and occupation? Unless that is recognized, then the situation will continue to simmer. So I think that acceptance of ground realities and a leadership that is willing to have that kind of vision and will to take it forward is the key element.
Sorry, both of you misunderstood my question. I was on a very micro scale of media relations. So you propose 3-point way to bring media relations. I'm saying that can you come up with guidelines that will keep media relations intact even when the flares are taking place? In other words, some courageous people who will come and say, hey, we don't have to go and abuse and demolish each other. Let us talk sense and bring that. And that disappears. When flares happen,
But
I
that
don't know about Indian side.
No, which is you see, the thing is, there is media and media and media. So therefore, even in the most tense of moments, you've had a situation whereby the discourse has been very civilized on certain platforms. And you have a situation that even when you have the best of relationship and there is bonhomie, there is a certain demonization which continues to take place. And as I said, so there is media and media and different kinds of media.
Well, maybe you are seeing that deeper picture. I
Yeah.
don't see as an ordinary viewer. I just feel that both sides join
Sorry.
their comfort position, which is confrontation.
I hope you're also watching the American media these days. I think CNN and Fox News is almost unwatchable on both sides because they've taken very clear positions, and they are positions which are poles apart.
But they don't threaten millions of lives.
I'm going to put on the programmatic director's hat, and I'm going to ask if somebody is willing to invest to study that project, we're more than happy to pursue that at the Atlantic Council. And also on some of the issues that you mentioned, I'm also going to take a 2-second commercial break here and advertise one of our capabilities, which is the newest capability at the Atlantic Council called the digital forensics. We've done some really interesting work on some of the Ukraine issues, in Syria, a report called Breaking Aleppo, which pieces together evidence available through multiple sources and also matches it with ground realities and ground truths to the degree that we can. And what we're trying to do that is use the capability within the South Asia to advance some of our work. So that's my sales pitch. Please follow us. Thank you, and support us if you can. I'm going to go to that.
But main thing is prevent future wars. We do not want new wars emanating because of demonization of Iran or demonization of Syria or something.
And if you have studied our program more closely inside the council, our posture vis-a-vis Iran is engaging Iran. So we don't look at containment. We want to engage Iran, and through the support of our director, Barbara Slavin, we've really moved very far in the last 2 to 3 years. And even now, we are working.
You see, for example, the Iraq War. I was reading a column by Tom Friedman on May 8th, 2003 in the New York Times. And the Iraq War took place on 20th of March. And he said, and this is Tom Friedman, the top writer of the New York Times. He said, and I quote, if 25 persons who work within 5 blocks of Washington, D.C., and he referred to K Block and so forth, retired generals, diplomats, journalists, and policymakers, none of them elected, if they had been exiled to an island, there would have been no Iraq War. So you can see how even in a dynamic democracy, a vibrant democracy like the United States, a war based on a lie was peddled by a small cabal, and it has destroyed the Middle East. And we are still facing the consequences of that. So I'm glad that you are taking a position where you feel that there should be a peaceful resolution of any issues that are there. And I think that is the important thing, that think tanks should not become enablers of policymakers or governments. They should have a thinking approach which is independent of the officially certified truth.
You're correct. I don't want this to become an endless conversation between us, but I'm also pointing out to an op-ed that was written by Kishore Mahbubani at once a good few years ago, and where he said, in the absence of a strong public sector, it's often compensated with a vibrant private sector. The strong public sector here, which he refers to as the U.S. government, and the private sector sometimes is the think tanks and the entities like us. And he said, how does the United States, which has a very vibrant strategic community per se, if we put it as, I call ourselves the epistemic actors of the strategic community, how does, in 1 square mile, you have so many strong private sector entities, and how do we pursue some of the worst strategic blunders in the world?
Yes.
But whether it's a blunder or not, history will judge us. But that said, I mean, you're right. We have a responsibility, and at this age of disinformation, which I call it, we cannot emphasize our role more seriously. This is taken up at a leadership level, and every conversation that we have with our leadership and our management, if there is a time that the council needs to act, it is now, and our role cannot be overstated here. And we are taking our positions our approaches, our policies, and our pursuit to issues much more seriously than we've ever done.
Good.
But Bharat, on a lighter note, the public sector and the private sector is today referred to as a swarm.
Yeah. And no, it's actually as of this morning or yesterday morning, it's referred to as a sewer.
Hi, my name is Ella Bierman. I'm with the Sindhi American Political Action Committee. My question is for Senator Hussain. Both of you talked about the rise of digital media in both countries, particularly within the last decade or so. And I mean, while there's been strides, is there a way that, still not a lot of attention is being given to more provincial, smaller provincial governments such as Sindh or Balochistan? Do you think it's possible, or there's a way to increase awareness about issues occurring in that province or region that will not just transcend at the provincial level, but also a national level and hopefully international level? And these issues particularly such as the high number of forced conversions that occur for Sindhi girls. That makes sense.
Well, all these issues which are there in the social media in Pakistan, the social media scene is quite free. And all the issues are coming up. They have even come into parliament. And people have taken positions on that. So these are aberrations rather than the norm. And those have strong positions have been taken by the Parliament of Pakistan on that. And it's the responsibility both of the federal government as well as the provincial government to ensure the protection of rights of all Pakistanis, including those who are non-Muslims. And that is being done.
I have the gentleman there, and then I'll...
Hi, my name is Wasim Abbasi. I work for the News International in Pakistan. Well, you talked about bringing people together. Sports has huge potential to bring people together, and given the fact that cricket is almost practiced as a religion in both countries, do you think government should step up their efforts to bring people together through sports, and India should allow Pakistani cricket with Pakistan team and their player to come to PSL and Pakistani player to play with IPL? This will actually create people-to-people contacts and bring the people together. Do you think so?
Well, fundamentally and conceptually, I agree with you that sports is a good enabler. It's a good confidence-building mechanism, and it has a certain role to play in promoting people-to-people contact. But is cricket between India and Pakistan really a sport? I think it's just a metaphor for war. And so therefore, it actually promotes more bitterness, it promotes more jingoism, more hyper-nationalism, rather than possibly creating a modus vivendi of people to come together. So therefore, well, that does not, it doesn't mean that we should not play cricket with each other. I think it's a good idea to play every game, whether it's hockey, football, kabaddi. In fact, one of the more popular sports between the two countries, especially the two Punjabs, is the kabaddi. There are kabaddi teams even as we speak going back and forth all the time. And insofar as IPL is concerned, well, that's a call which the IPL board has to take. But conceptually, if you ask me, I don't think that there should be any discrimination of any player from whichever cricket playing country he is to play in any other country. So eventually, at some point in time, if let's suppose either the governments become a little more conducive towards each other, or somewhere down the line the alternative narrative becomes so strong that it actually compels the governments to come together, you will find an automatic resolution of all these issues.
I'd like to also take that on. I feel that let's take the last match as an illustration. 18th of June, Pakistan versus India. And I think, Mr. Manish Tiwari, this time you were proven wrong. It didn't become like a warlike situation. It was the most civilized, the most congenial match which we have seen India-Pakistan, where about over 500 million people were watching some of the finest cricket games. And I'll also add one other thing. Look at the sportsman spirit. A Pakistani, Amir Sohail, criticized the Pakistan cricket captain, Sarfraz Ahmed. And who came to the defense of Sarfraz Ahmed? Sourav Ganguly, the former Indian cricket captain. and Harbhajan Singh. They defended. So I think that cricket, in my view, has tremendous potential, and I think to make it hostage to the whims of some bureaucrat in New Delhi or the cricket team of Cricket Council of India or Pakistan for the matter, I think the more cricket we have, I think it will create a more conducive atmosphere. And about Kabaddi, I was in Ludhiana a few years ago for the World Cup Kabaddi tournament with Prakash Singh Badal Saab and Sukhbir Singh Saab. It was an excellent match. So I think that this sports interaction are extremely important, and I think that it was ironical that India, which had refused to play Pakistan for so long, ended up playing Pakistan, and then and we have seen in Pakistan when the Indian cricket team came in 2005, we lost to India, and the people of Pakistan applauded the victory of India over Pakistan on Pakistani soil. So I think cricket has a tremendous potential of breaking down walls and barriers which exist. And I think I would request Mr. Manish Tiwari also to take that initiative, that the Indian government and the Indian Cricket Board should take that to play more cricket between
Maybe
India
the
and
Atlantic
Pakistan.
Council can host a cricket match. Yours.
Hi, I'm Takshil Sachdev. I'm an Indian, but I'm currently working at the International Center for Religion and Diplomacy. Thank you for putting together this event. My question's for both, because I want to hear both sides on this, but since 2014 and the Modi government coming to power, I've personally believed I've seen a deterioration of relations and also like media representations on both sides. But how do you feel that has happened, and has that happened? Has it deteriorated further? Thank you.
Who wants to take them on?
I think that it's unfortunate after the election of Mr. Narendra Modi that India seems to be pursuing an ideological foreign policy vis-a-vis Pakistan, which is based on the ideology of Hindutva, and which is an extension of what is happening to the Muslim population of India, which, as you know, is about 14% of India's population. The Dalits are 17%, and then 2-3% Christians and Sikhs. About 1/3 of India is, that kind of. So that is creating more complications, and it's also leading to a certain kind of bigotry and also a certain kind of chasm between communities, which is sanctioned by the state, or at times. For example, the Chief Minister of the Uttar Pradesh, Yogi Adityanath, his mindset, his attitudes, and there are even smaller events, like for the first time there was no Muslim representation in the UP government. There was not even an iftar party there. So symbolism often becomes substance in these situations. So I think that there we see a regression in that, and the regression is not political. It's more deep-seated, and I think that would have certain implications. And on a broader scale, see, India is a very diverse, very pluralistic society, a great civilization, and the Nehruvian ideals of secularism are being, I think, systematically undermined. And I gave the example in today's Hindustan Times of Mr. H.N. Padra's, when he talks of revision of textbooks and removal of important part of Indian history, the legacy of the Muslim civilization to India, which the living symbol is the Taj Mahal, by the way, which is an icon. So I think that would create more cleavages and more fault lines within Indian society, which is unfortunate, and which then will have a resonance in the region, and it's already happening.
Well, I think we need to really look at this entire situation in a certain perspective. I don't think 2014 is the inflection point. The inflection point in India-Pakistan relations was 26/11. After 2008, irrespective of the fact that whether there was a UPA government or they were succeeded by a BJP-led NDA government, the relationship with Pakistan has been in a deep freeze. And the idea is not to make it polemical, because that's what happens whenever you have an India-Pakistan conversation. But there is a feeling, and a very widespread feeling among the people of India, not limited to the government, that action against the perpetrators of 26/11 is a prerequisite for forward movement between India and Pakistan. And ironically, at a point in time when Prime Minister Narendra Modi actually suo moto decided to land up in Lahore for Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's granddaughter's wedding, something which we in the opposition criticized extensively, primarily because we thought that there was not enough preparation for the visit, but the Prime Minister in his wisdom decided to take that action. Immediately it was followed by the attack on the airbase in Pathankot. And post the attack on the Pathankot airbase, when India invited a joint investigating team from Pakistan, which consisted of people from across their agencies, and gave them access to actually have a look at the evidence, which pointed to the fact that this was an attack which was sponsored from across the border, people had come from across the border. Rather than taking that evidence on board, you saw a knee-jerk reaction saying that this is a false flag operation and the Indians have done it themselves. So it's very easy to, let's say, blame Prime Minister Narendra Modi or the right-wing approach which they as a government have. But in reality, the inflection point between India and Pakistan is 26/11.
Did you?
Yeah. My name is Arifa Khalid, and I am also a member of the parliament. And
welcome.
It's a great pleasure to be here and hear these gentlemen who have much more experience, and they have good insight about their countries. So I have just a simple question, because I just want to know that what do they think personally? What is the punchline they can give that create this negative energy into the positive energy eventually, rather than thinking about the past and mincing whatever happened? So what is new we can really think how we can go ahead? So what is the positive thing they really see anyway in these two countries? Thank you.
Some billion-dollar question.
Well, I think that the strength of our societies is our people. And we do not have oil or natural resources. We are not rich that way. But I think the human resources of both countries, they are very talented, some of the best and the brightest. But I think also at the same time, there's a larger responsibility, in my view, on our Indian friends. India is a larger country. And it has to be also, and they should realize that size does not equal strength. And it should have a big-hearted, a large-hearted approach towards issues that can be resolved. Otherwise, then there'll be complications. It's not just Pakistan. Then you have complications with Nepal. You have complications with Myanmar. You have complications with China and other countries. So I think there's a larger responsibility. And at times, we do feel that India tries to impose its diktat. And I think that has to be. So it's the mindset which is important to change, and that bullying or browbeating is not the way out. And that will not be acceptable to the smaller. You can see Nepal had a 7-month-long blockade imposed by India, but they resisted. They faced it. And I visited Nepal twice in that. And the people showed a very stoic determination in protecting their sovereignty and their independence, and they succeeded.
No, I think the one thing that we should very seriously look at, and it needs to be kept in mind, that if we try and contemplate a very expansive settlement of all outstanding issues between India and Pakistan, it's not going to happen. So therefore, it's a relationship which will consolidate with baby steps and with incremental progress which needs to be consolidated. A good starting point, according to me, would actually be allowing day visas between Lahore and Amritsar and letting people go across for the day and come back, actually go and have lunch, dinner, breakfast, whatever, meet people. So therefore, these small incremental steps that if we take and we are able to hold them, notwithstanding the provocations, we would be making a certain amount of progress. And yes, Senator Mushahid Hussain is absolutely correct that strength does not or size does not equal to strength. But size actually has its own strategic footprint. And the fact is that India, whether somebody likes it or not, has the largest strategic footprint in the region. And that's also a geopolitical reality which people will possibly need to reconcile themselves to.
What I will do is, I'll take your question, will be the last question. I'll take your question, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to end it slightly earlier so that you get a one-on-one interaction with you.
Excuse me. My name's Arnold Zeitlin, and Wishab Saad and I have a relationship both in the house arrest and thereafter.
35 years.
Yes. I'd like to inject China into the conversation. And perhaps you can explain to me how Pakistan's relationship with China and India's relationship with China have an impact on the relationship of Pakistan and China.
Look, insofar as India is concerned, we think that both these relationships are mutually exclusive to each other. We have a very robust relationship with China. In fact, our bilateral trade with China is more than our bilateral trade with the United States of America. We do $80 billion with China, while we do only $70 billion with the United States of America. It's another matter that we have a positive balance of trade qua the US and a negative balance of trade qua China. And insofar as Pakistan is concerned, that's a separate bilateral relationship. Now, the Chinese have a relationship with Pakistan. Yes, certain aspects of that relationship, especially the 1963 treaty which ceded certain parts of Jammu and Kashmir, do have an impact, and those are the contentious issues of the relationship. But notwithstanding that, from 1988 onwards, when late Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi visited China and there was a thaw in the relationship, we have consolidated it, and yes, at this current point in time, there is a bit of a snafu with regard to Doklam. There is a kind of a misunderstanding, or if some people would like to put it in more aggressive terms, a standoff. But we are very confident that between us and the Chinese and Bhutan, we would be able to resolve it amicably, notwithstanding the rhetoric which is going around on all sides.
Well, China and Pakistan have an old relationship, and the India factor is there. I mentioned size not being equal to strength, because the size of China and India is roughly the same, but there's a gross disparity in economic strength. And you can see that India is where China was in 2004 in terms of GDP and so forth, which is 13 years behind now. So we feel that with China right now there is a opening not just for Pakistan. Already has a very old strategic relationship, and that has been tested. And I would say, Mr. Arnold Zeitlin, because you have been an observer of Pakistan, but also you have taught in Guangzhou, in the university there, you've had Chinese, family also, I would say. And so you have a very strong interaction. You are one of the few Westerners I know who knows South Asia very well and China very well also at the same time. So you are in a unique position as a journalist and as a professor and as an academic to understand that. The point that arises is that right now, China has launched the biggest diplomatic and developmental initiative of the 21st century, the One Belt, One Road. And unfortunately, I see that in India, there is some dithering on that because they are not sure. Some people want India to play the role of a counterweight to China, to sort of play the China card. I think some people in America, maybe Japan or other countries want that. Others would like that India should be part of the mainstream, which is the Asian century. And in the Asian century, this One Belt, One Road initiative is there. And Pakistan is part of that. And every South Asian country, barring India, is part of that. So India, in a sense, is isolated within its own region vis-a-vis China on this issue. And I feel that, I hope that better sense will prevail, because this is something which is offering, there are no winners or, in that. There are no losers in that. They're all winners. They're all benefiting from that. So we feel that in Pakistan's case, the China relationship by the Indian side is overplayed. Like, we do not worry when India gets arms from the Israelis or the Americans or the Russians. But everything about China is either misstated, everything about China is also misconstrued, especially when it comes to Pakistan. So we feel that Pakistan is, would like to benefit from this One Belt, One Road, in which there are 65 countries. And Pakistan has a unique strategic position because we are the only country where the Silk Road economic belt, the land route, meets with the maritime Silk Road. So that connectivity places Pakistan in a unique position vis-a-vis China. And secondly, Pakistan already has a 50-year-old strategic relationship with China, which is friction-free, and which is a unique model of interstate relations between two neighbors. So in that context, I think that the transformation that is taking place in Asia, where the balance of economic and political power is shifting from the west to the east. In this 21st, the Asian century, where China now is a pivotal player, we see China's role as a source of strength and a source of stability in the Asian context. And we feel that India too should be part of that broad Asian mainstream when we talk of the Asian century.
Thank you.
May I just supplement to that? You know, the Asian century is actually going to be defined by the interplay of 5 Asian powers. First of all, the United States of America, which has been playing a preeminent role in the Asian region, now going back to the Second World War. Number 2, Japan. Number 3, China, and no chronological order. You know, number 4, India, and number 5, Russia. So therefore, if there is going to be an Asian century, or if the 21st century is actually going to be an Asian century, it is the equilibrium, it is the balance of these 5 large players in Asia which is going to determine that. So therefore, if there are going to be initiatives which really do not factor in the concerns of these 5 Asian powers, I'm afraid you are not going to have an Asian century, but you possibly are going to have a lot of dissonance in Asia, you know, as we've been seeing in the South China Sea to begin with, in various other parts of Asia. So I think, you know, when we step back and talk about the Asian century, we also need to keep the Asian power dynamic in a certain context.
I'll just add to that, just a moment. For long after World War II, Asia Pacific was seen, this Indian Ocean region, as an American lake. That has now changed. And that's why we see 2 competing trends. The next competition is primarily naval now, and which the US Navy, the Chinese Navy, Indian Navy is also trying, and other countries are also trying. But the 2 basic trends are very clear. One is that there are some elements which want to spark a new Cold War. Containment of China in Asia, talk of confrontation of Russia, and the other is the new regionalism. The emergence of what I call in our region the Greater South Asia, where we talk of South Asia is just not India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, and the Maldives. Greater South Asia is more of an economic concept where it includes China, it includes Iran, Afghanistan, Myanmar, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and woven together with this connectivity. And this is huge. This is an amazing transformation that we are seeing in our lives, and fueled by this One Belt, One Road initiative. So that's why it's inclusive. It's not something directed against somebody to contain somebody. It is to have everybody share in that. So I think that in that context, when we look at as a nation, when I look at that, I feel that we have to be part of that mainstream rather than just buying up weapons or trying to have the old Cold War mentality or looking at countries through Cold War lenses, because that is now passé. That won't work. And we have seen the shock and awe after 9/11. That failed, whether it's Afghanistan or Iraq or other countries. And I think the time has come that we have to learn lessons. And when I say size doesn't equal strength, by that reckoning, Cuba, 90 miles from America, should have been under the American thumb. But it was 60 years later, Obama recognized the independence and sovereignty of a small 9 million country of Cuba and accepted that. So that when people stand up for their rights, I think nobody can stop them. Thank you very much.
I'm glad that you both choose to disagree, at least at some levels, towards the end. I reached my objective, and with that I just would want to invite you to thank the speakers and allow you enough time to interact with them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.